If there's a running joke that my friends have about wheeling with me, it's that we never get off the trail before sundown. But then, it's not like I plan our trips to go well into the night. They just often do. More times than not, it is because we are having a whole lot of fun. But there are times where circumstances do force it upon us. Either way, having a good set of off-road lights can be super helpful to have, but how do you operate them if your Jeep JL Wrangler or JT Gladiator didn't come with a set of auxiliary switches? What if you do have them, but want or need more than the 4 that they give you? For years, the answer has been to install one of these. This is the Switch Pro's SP9100, and as you can see, it comes with a power module, a mounting plate, switch panel, and all the hardware and wiring that you'll need to install this on your Jeep. I should note that the Switch Pro system can operate more than just lights, and they even give you a whole host of labels that you can apply, including ones for an air compressor, lockers, and just about any other gadget that you might have. So let's get this thing installed. The first thing we're going to do is take our power module and bolt it up to our mounting plate. But in order to do that, we're going to need to get some hardware out of this bag. Let's see, I think we're going to need to grab these 2 screws and these 2 nuts with the serrated washers on the backs of them. Then we're going to take our power module, place it on top of our mounting plate, slip in the screws, and then we can thread on these nuts. Because the nuts have serrated washers on them, all you're going to need is a Phillips screwdriver to secure them in place. Now we're going to take this large black ground cable and we're going to secure it to the back of the mounting plate. But in order to do that, we're going to need to grab one of these M6 bolts, a nut, and a washer, as well as a 10mm wrench and socket to secure it in place. And then we're going to grab another M6 bolt, slip it through this lower hole, place a washer on top of it, and then we'll secure it in place with another nut. Again, using a 10mm wrench and socket, we'll go ahead and tighten these in place. And then we can add one more nut to the top of it. Now this point will effectively become your ground point for all your lights and accessories once everything's installed. Alright, now it's time to start working underneath the hood. But before I can do anything, I'm going to need to partially remove the Rugged Ridge snorkel that I've got installed. With that out of the way, we can now go ahead and remove this fender bolt as well as this ground stud nut using a 10mm socket. Okay, so now we can take this assembled power module on the mounting plate and we're going to take this ground cable and affix it to the ground stud here on the fender. So we'll place this on here like so. And then we'll take the factory nut to secure it back in place. Before we go too tight, I want to make sure everything's going to fit properly. Looks like it is. Okay. Now we're going to place this mounting plate on top of the fender and secure it in place using this factory bolt, as well as an M6 bolt and washer provided with the kit. Right, let's see, I'm going to need to grab this communications cable next, as well as this large 16-pin connector, and we're going to get them plugged in. This heavy gauge wire that's red in color with a large fuse on one end will now need to get connected to the power module onto this stud right here. And take off this nut, set that aside. And then we're going to secure it in place with that nut again. And use a 13mm wrench to tighten it. Put this cover on it. Good. So this end will need to be connected directly to the positive terminal of the battery, and we're going to connect it to this post right here, and we'll need a 10mm socket to free up that nut. Okay, we're going to route it in. We can tighten it back in place using the same socket. With that done, we can now go ahead and find the black ground lead with the ring terminal here. Let me go ahead and clip this off. And this can get connected directly to the negative terminal lead on the battery as well. Using a 10mm socket, I'm going to go ahead and free up this nut. And we'll attach it to it. Once again, using a 10mm socket, I'm going to go ahead and tighten up this nut to secure everything in place. Okay, now it's time to open up the PDC, and we're going to find the fuse for the cigarette lighter, and according to the diagram, that is going to be F52 right there. And for our purposes, it'll be this yellow fuse right here. So we're going to go ahead and use the extraction tool that comes inside of the PDC, as you can see right here. And then I'm going to go ahead and try to grab that thing out, just like that. As you can see, it's a small yellow 20 amp micro tube fuse, and we're going to go ahead and plug that into the empty slot on the ATA circuit that Switch Pros provides with their kit. And you can see that I'm going to plug that in right now. And then this whole thing will get plugged into the slot that it came out of. Just like that. All right, we can go ahead and put this thing back where it came from so we don't lose it. And then we're going to find the light blue ignition wire in this mess right here. And you can actually even see it has the word ignition on it. So we can go ahead and feed this through, pull off this end. And then ultimately we're going to plug this into the butt connector on the ATA circuit that we just plugged into the PDC. This seems like a lot of wire. Maybe I'll cut it shorter. Okay, I think we can go ahead and put this cover back on now. Okay, so there's one more wire that we're going to need to find, and that is this white lights wire. And as before, it actually has it printed on the insulator itself, as you can see right here. And this is ultimately going to get connected to the side marker light, and that's going to allow you to dim the backlighting on the switch panel itself. Now, in order to get to the wire that we're going to need to attach this white lights wire to, we're going to need to free up the fender liner. And the first thing we're going to do is remove this bolt right here with an 8mm socket. Then we're going to change out our socket to a 10mm socket and remove this bolt right here. Last but not least, we're going to use a trim pry tool just like this, and we're going to pull out the push tab securing the fender liner to the body right here. Okay. Now the whole fender liner can be peeled back, revealing, it's going to be hard to see, but there is a white wire right here with a brown tracer. So this is what we're going to attach the ATA circuit that Switch Pros provides with their kit to. So this is the ATA circuit that we'll be attaching to. Essentially, we're going to slip that white wire with the brown tracer right in between these blades here, close it up, and then we'll crimp it together using a pair of pliers. I'll do that now. So that took a little effort to get to, but that's probably the worst of everything that we're going to need to do. So from here, we're going to focus our attention on getting this white lights wire fed through underneath the fender liner and attached to that ATA circuit. Like before, I have way more wire than I actually need, so I'm just going to cut it down to the point where it reaches the ATA circuit. And then from there, you can go ahead and connect the spade terminal provided with the ATA circuit, and then crimp it on. Okay, from here we just need to plug it in. There. Okay, I think we can button everything back up again now. So now the question is, how to get this thing, the communications cable, into the cab of the Jeep. So I should note that Switch Pros does have a kit that'll have you route the cable along the cowl and then through the firewall underneath the brake booster, and then connect it to their switch panel that they'll have you mount to the base of the 8-pillar handle. However, I wanted to mount my switch panel a little differently. Something up and out of the way, like up on my CB bar. Needless to say, this is the Switch Pros mounting bracket that I now make for my CB bar, and as you can see, it's made to work with the SP9100 and the 12-switch RCR Force 12. I've also made it with multiple slotted mounting locations so that it can be adjustable and it can accommodate a CB, ham, or race radio of different makes and sizes. As an added benefit, once installed, it'll even allow you to relocate your radio an inch closer to the windshield, or should I say, an inch further away from your face. With that said, I'm going to take a slightly different approach to getting this communications cable inside the cab of our Jeep, and to begin, I'm going to go ahead and remove the cowl. Now before I can do that, I'm going to use a 3/8 inch wrench to remove the antenna. And then I'm going to use a Torx 40 bit to remove the 4 bolts securing the cowl in place. Now while this might look a little different, being that it is a part of our snorkel system, essentially the process for you will be the same. I see a penny. Lucky penny. Next, we're going to want to open things up, and if you have a hard top like me, all you're going to need to do is open up the Freedom Top panels. Of course, if you've got a soft top, all you need to do is open up the Sunrider. Now, if your Jeep came with speakers on top of the dash, you're going to need to use a trim pry tool like this to pop it off. Now we're going to need to remove the A-pillar handle, and in order to do that, we're going to need to pull off these covers like this. And then we're going to use a 10mm socket to remove the 2 bolts securing it in place. From here we can just wiggle it off. Switching up bits to a Torx T40 bit, we're now going to remove the 4 bolts securing the windshield to the roll bar. All right, time to get this thing inside. Ultimately, what we're going to do is route the communications cable through the cowl and then take it up underneath the A-pillar. So for now, I'm just going to toss it up and over. Get this loosely routed. And then we're going to tilt the windshield forward just a bit and rest it through this channel right here. And then we're going to set the windshield down. Now the Switch Pros kit comes with a 10.5 foot cable, which is a lot of cable. Way more than we need to get to our CB and our switch panel. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of just roughly gauge approximately how much I think I'll need, just by kind of figuring it out. And it looks like I could probably just put it in right here. The rest of the cable we can tie up and tuck away and hide inside the cowl. All right, so now we can go ahead and put the cowl back on. And then using a Torx T40 bit, we're going to go ahead and secure all these bolts in place. The communications cable can now be tucked up into the cowl area. And because we have a snorkel, the space is a little bit tight, but for you guys, it should be plenty of room. Just to pretty things up, I'm going to go ahead and tuck all this wiring behind the trim. Of course, all this will be covered by the A-pillar handle. And then we can go ahead and tuck it behind these plastic covers as well. All right, looks like I just need to button everything back up. So assuming you guys already have one of my CB bars installed in your Jeep, we're now going to want to remove the radio before we go any further. Of course, for those of you who do not have one of my CB bars installed, click on the link below to see a video on how to install one in your Jeep. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the bolt securing the CB bar to the roll bar, and you're going to need to use a 1/2 inch wrench for that. You don't actually need to completely remove the bolt and nut on the driver's side. We just need it loose enough so that when we tilt it up, it'll have some wiggle room. So on this side, we're going to want to completely remove this bolt and nut. And we're going to lift up the CB bar. Take our communications cable, and then we're going to feed it through it. At least until we feel it come up to this center hole. If you use your finger, you can kind of fish it out. There you go. So if you have a little extra line or cable like I have here, I'm just going to go ahead and tuck it into the CB bar itself to give it less presence. Okay, now we can go ahead and reinstall everything. All right, we're getting close now. All we need to do is install our switch panel onto our mount. And in order to do that, we're going to grab this bag of hardware, dump it out. And there's these 4 studs that'll need to be threaded into the back, just by hand. And then we're going to feed the communications cable through the port, studs all the way through the holes. And then we'll take these nylock nuts to secure everything in place. Okay, so I'm going to point out that there are these 2 separate C brackets that are given as an option depending on how you mount these switch panels on. And if you're using something like an RCR Force 12, it'll come with these brackets as well, and you will need to use them. They will provide just enough of an extra gap to provide wiggle room for these wires. But in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and use our 8mm socket to tighten down these bolts, or these nuts, excuse me. And you just want to get them on tight enough. You don't actually want to crank on them because you'll actually destroy the threads. So just tight enough. Make sure this thing is centered. Just give it a slight more tug. Now we're going to determine how we want to bolt up our switch mount to the CB bar. If we go right here onto the center, and then we'll take our radio, and if we put it in its stock position, it would be something like this. But since we can, I think I'm going to go ahead and relocate it closer to the windshield, maybe more like that. So I'm going to go ahead and bolt this into position, and then we'll get our radio installed. And before we tighten everything down, we can shift this thing in and out to determine exactly where we want it positioned. I think this is about right. We can tighten it down using a 7/16 inch ratchet. Okay, so now these 2 can be plugged in together. Okay, now we can place our radio mount on top of the bracket, position as needed. Now we can tighten up these bolts using a 7/16 inch socket. The radio can now be reinstalled onto it. And then using a Phillips screwdriver, or at least for this particular radio, we can secure everything in place. Now we can plug everything in. So that's all there is to it, or at least in terms of the install of the Switch Pro system and onto my CB bar using my brand new switch mount. I should note that Switch Pros does provide these various insulators for all the wiring that we worked on, but for our purposes I didn't actually use them, just so I could better show how everything worked and where they belonged. But I will go ahead and come back with some split conduit later to make everything look nice and factory. As far as all these colorful wires go, these are what you're going to attach all your lights and accessories to. Switches 1 through 4, these 4 right here, these actually have a 20 amp max. And then 4 through 8, when you combine the wires together, there's actually a total of 35 amp max on those. Now, this is a solid state system, and because of it, it is fully programmable. It really is amazing. And if you can believe it, they even offer an app that's available for both Apple and Android systems. So once everything's installed, you can actually pair this up using a Bluetooth connection, and then you can do all kinds of things, including controlling all the switches right from your phone. So here, let's check it out. Auto connect. We're going to scan for local devices, Switch Pros. Here you can see all the different switches that we can control. So for instance, if I want to turn on switch number 6, click on that, and let's look up here. So as you can see here, 6 is lit up just like I have on my phone, and then I'll turn it off, and I'll turn on number 3. Pretty cool stuff. Now we can also change the color on the screen. We can click on settings, and you can see here we have config switches. We can configure them to be momentary, or we can make it so they can do a variety of different things. Backlight settings. If we want, we can change it from, right now is white. Let's just say we want to make it red. You can see the switch panel is red, or blue, or green, or really pretty much any other color you can think of using the color picker that they have here. There really are a ton of other things that you can do with this app, and I would encourage you to refer to the instructions that Switch Pros provides, because they have all kinds of details on what you can do, how you can program each individual button, and otherwise. So I'm sure that there are more than a few of you who wants to know, how does it all work? You want to see it in action. Well, you're in luck. I've actually got a pair of auxiliary reverse lights that I've had installed on my Evo bumper for some time now, and I'm going to go ahead and hook it up to this system just to show you how it works. Again, this is just a test. I'll actually put on more permanent connections in the future with ring terminals to keep everything safe. But for our purposes, we just want to see the lights come on. We're going to take this red wire, which I believe is for the number 2 switch. And because this is LED, I don't know why everything's always opposite. I'm going to pair these guys together. Temporary cap. And then we'll go ahead and put this on our ground. And let's go inside and turn things on. Accessories. Everything's lit up. This is number 2. Let's go see the lights. And there you have it. The lights are working. Be sure to check back for future episodes, because we have a whole host of new lighting solutions that we'll be installing on our Jeep JT Gladiator. So, I can't really say that I'm digging the way these studs are sticking out as far as they are. I think I'm going to have to do something about that. There. I think that looks a lot better. And you can be sure that these screws will be included with the purchase of your switch mount.